wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Israelcast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Stephen Shalowitz, coming to you from my apartment, since we're still in lockdown mode here in New York City, given the COVID-19 pandemic. So our sound is a little different than what you're normally used to here on the program, where we usually record in the studio. But at the end of the day, the show must go on so we can keep on track to release new episodes of Israelcast every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, however it's recorded, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Simply search for Israelcast. That easy. And while you're at it, do rate and review us to make it easier for more people around the world to find us. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. It's jnf.org/Israelcast. Once again, jnf.org/Israelcast. All right, as for this episode, it's always a treat to welcome back a guest to Israelcast, and it's especially so when that guest is Ambassador Ido Aharoni. Our featured guest way back in episode 21, that was a long time ago. Ido is a global distinguished professor at New York University School of International Relations. He's a member of the International Advisory Council of APCO Worldwide and the founder of the renowned Brand Israel program, as well as known as a nation branding practitioner. He was Israel's longest-serving consul general in New York and previously held two other positions in LA and in New York as well. He's been a witness to and a part of history, including serving under then Foreign Minister Shimon Peres as policy assistant, taking part in the back-channel negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians that led to the signing of what was known as the Oslo Accords. There's never a shortage of topics to discuss with Ido, and that's why we invited him back, especially now at this critical juncture the world finds itself in. So with that, we warmly welcome Ido Aharoni back to Israelcast, who joins us now on the line from his home outside Jerusalem. Ido, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me again.
We've got a number of bases to cover, and I really wanted to start, Ido, by talking about the coronavirus. Of course, everyone's itching to get back to Israel, and before we talk about Israel opening up, can you just share any thoughts or perspectives on how Israel is scientifically developing any technologies, any scientific breakthroughs that are taking place in Israel right now that you'd like to share with us?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because just in the last couple of days, it was announced that there's an Israeli company very, very close to developing a basic vaccine that will be introduced no later than December of this year, 2020. I can tell you that I'm in touch with the leading universities in Israel, and all of them have scientific teams of people working around the clock, trying to learn about the virus, trying to understand what type of vaccine could work. There are even efforts to use what we called secondary medications, meaning the repurposing of existing medications, trying to map their side effects. Maybe there is a clue, maybe there is a solution, maybe there is a direction in existing pre-approved drugs that already exist in the market.
And which universities are at the forefront here, Ido?
So obviously you have the Hebrew University, the Tel Aviv University, Ben Gurion University, the Weizmann Institute, Technion, University of Haifa. Almost every major research university in Israel is involved. And I know that the total number of teams that work on this very issue is around 135 globally. And I would say that Israel is probably involved in at least 5 or 6 of them.
So it's very much all hands on deck, really.
Given the fact that the number of teams working on cracking the code of COVID-19 and the amount of money, the amount of organizational resources that are being put in, I believe that there will be a positive progress announced very, very soon, because when humanity decides to tackle an issue and spends so much time and so much energy and uses the best brains in the world, I think something's good must come out of it, and that's my feeling.
Right. Listen, everyone's As I said at the top of the program, everyone's really itching to get back to Israel. So what do you think the country is going to look like when tourism really kicks in and when everything really opens up?
So in Israel, as you well know, we were not hit hard by COVID-19. If you compare the situation in Israel to other European countries, we are more like other Mediterranean countries like Egypt, like Greece, like Cyprus. Um, Domestic tourism, which naturally we expected it to be the first form of tourism to recover, is indeed recovering very, very quickly. I can tell you that the overbooking in Eilat for the months of July and August is already 250%, which
Wow.
means that most of the people that booked hotel rooms are not going to get a chance to stay there because hotels simply overbooked. So domestic tourism made a comeback, and it's a huge comeback. As for international tourism, Israelis are still allowed back into Israel from wherever they are in the world. They have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, but non-Israelis are still not allowed in. And the reason is because we're not sure that we were able to contain the pandemic. In fact, there was a very good period during the month of May where the number of infections that were reported was very low. In fact, the lowest since the beginning of the crisis. But during the month of June, we're seeing a very disturbing spike. We don't know what's the reason for that spike. Some people claim it's because we simply test more. So when you do more testing, by definition, you'll find more people that were infected, but they do not report any symptoms, which turned out to be a very significant number of people. People that were infected, but have no symptoms. And so this is really the issue. When we will be able, once Israel will be able to contain the pandemic and to see the number of infections going down to what it used to be, I believe that then the way to reopen the borders is going to be very short. I'll just say one last thing. When you look at, for example, special events like weddings and family celebrations, the government yesterday announced that they will allow up to 250 people per each event, which is, I think, a huge progress from the number of 50 that we were previously instructed to.
So, Ido, what do you think things like concerts will look like, sporting events will look like?
So it's very interesting that you say that because, again, in Israel, one of the first countries in the world where the major league in football and soccer resumed with no fans. Same thing applies to basketball. So I think that what we will be seeing is mass gatherings with social distancing. Some restaurants in Israel found a solution by simply creating a barrier, a physical barrier between tables. And I think that this is going to be also the solution, a physical barrier, a physical divider. That will be the solution also in stadiums. It will ultimately be the solution on airplanes. There'll be no other way as long as we don't have an effective vaccine. That's what's going to happen. You'll have social distancing. You'll have people wearing masks, people using alcohol gel all the time, sanitizers, and you'll have to have physical dividers.
Well, as I think you know, JNF, Jewish National Fund, launched a series of virtual tours of Israel because, of course, the tourism industry was really, really hit hard. The tour guides, museums, and so on. And so I'm just really wondering how Israelis responded to the lack of tourism, not just from a financial perspective, but from a psychological perspective.
Well, it's been very hard. It's been very hard because a lot of people know Israel as a startup nation, but the truth is that the tourism industry is the one single largest industry in the country. It employs 1.2 million people that provide for nearly 3.5 million people. Unemployment in Israel today is around 25%, which is a complete devastation to our economy. Tourism is about 4% of Israel's gross national product, which is huge. And people have to understand that tourism is one of the main lifelines of Israel's economy. So Israelis took it very hard. It affected, almost every job in the market, from taxi drivers all the way to people that serve food in restaurants, and cooks, and hotel staff, and so on and so forth, all the way to the airport, which was completely empty.
I'm just wondering, from an environmental perspective, did you notice a change in, for example, air quality, any sounds, any sights that you noticed that were different as a result of the lockdown?
Well, we did notice a change with animals. So we live in a mountainous area, so animals basically reclaimed their territory once cars stopped driving around, and we see it all over the country. All over the country, animals reclaimed their territories, and they just started, walking freely in our streets. It could be, anything from deer to pigs to what have you. And so that was a very interesting element that was covered widely, not just by Israeli mainstream media, but also by the people themselves. So every person that saw an animal in his or her neighborhood posted it on social media. Regarding the quality of the air, Israel doesn't really suffer acutely from air pollution problem like you used to have in the 1990s in LA, or like you used to have in Beijing. Israel, by and large, with the exception of the Haifa Bay Area, where we have some problems, by and large, we don't have that problem. So where I live especially is perhaps the best air quality in the world, in the hills of Jerusalem.
Fabulous. And just before we move on, how are you personally coping with COVID-19?
So, we came back home once NYU moved to remote learning. And so I've been teaching from my home in the Jerusalem area. And we've had, by and large, a very positive experience, because this was a time of a great deal of productivity, a time for reflection, a time for rest, a time for to do all the things that I wanted to do. And for example, I wrote a lot during that time, which is something I usually don't have time to do on a regular basis. I published many articles in the last several months.
Did you miss getting on a plane, Ido?
No, I don't. I traveled before the crisis a great deal, I would say on a weekly basis, all over the world. And I certainly don't miss that. I think that the rest was, the universe was trying to tell us something here.
I agree 100%. Absolutely.
And I think that it's a humbling experience.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, listen, moving on, but actually related to COVID-19, as it was reported in the news, planes carrying medical supplies from the Gulf to the PA landed at Ben Gurion. Your thoughts on what that signals?
One of the things that will happen as a result of COVID-19, and in many ways, what you're seeing nowadays in the streets of the United States is a reflection of that, is a struggle. It's going to be a clash, a confrontation between two worldviews. One worldview that will say, let's restore quickly the old order, because the old order was a win-win situation. The world experienced unprecedented prosperity. Let's go back. And you're going to have against that a different school of thought that will say, listen, the world is never going to be the same. As I said before, the universe was trying to tell us something. We need to consume responsibly. We need to fix the injustices of society. We need to be more equal, and so on and so forth. And that clash is already happening. And I think that what you're seeing now is the beginning of that political clash. It will happen all over the world, because of not so much because of the pandemic itself, but because of the economic devastation that the pandemic brought about. So even a country like Israel, where the virus did not attack, in the same intensity as it did in England or in Italy, yet the economic devastation is the same. And so the repercussions are going to be similar all over the world. And what you're seeing in the United States today, in my humble opinion, is much bigger than just that issue of the way George Floyd was killed in police custody, which was a horrible thing. I think it's much bigger than that, obviously.
And just out of curiosity, what's been the response in Israel, the man on the street?
Well, the Israelis usually are very ethnocentric, which means they look at everything through the prism of is this good for us or not? And I think that there's a mixed view here. Some people think that this coalition of minorities that looks like is running the show right now, Israel is not on their good side, and that's a very bad sign for Israel. On the other hand, you have many Israelis, like many of the people that I interact with in the academic world, that feel that this is a correction that has to happen in the American society. And so you have people that have a more of a universalist view, and Israelis that have more of an ethnocentric view of the same event. But I think that with no exception, Israelis are obviously completely shocked by the images of what's coming from the United States. And Israelis are concerned because we historically bet on the U.S. The U.S. is Israel's most intimate, closest friends, most trusted ally. And when our best friend is in trouble, it's a reason for us to be concerned.
Sure. Just to go back to Israel's relations with its neighbors, the former Dubai police chief, as I'm sure you read, called for a normalization of relations between the UAE and Israel. And I'm wondering, was that a rather bold statement for him to make? Was it just the obvious statement for him to make, in your view? And was he really just putting it out there to test the waters? Or was there another meaning behind what he was saying?
No, I think that they all understand, especially in the Gulf countries, that Israel is part of the advanced world. If they want to be part of that world, they can only benefit from strengthening the ties with Israel. You asked me before about that, and I said that the clash is going to result in several scenarios. One of them will be a more collaborative form of diplomacy. What does it mean? The world reacted to World War II by recreating the League of Nations in the form of the United Nations. The United Nations was established in 1951 in 1945 in San Francisco as a very optimistic, progressive, forthcoming, inclusive organization. I don't know if you ever read the charter, but when you read the charter of the United Nations, it's a very optimistic, even inspiring document. What happened to the United Nations over the years is less relevant. My point is that this was the reaction of the global community to World War II and the atrocities of the 20th century. I believe that humanity will respond in a similar way to COVID-19 and to the economic devastation that followed it by creating a form of collaborative international relations. And what you saw coming from Dubai is just one example of how it's going to be in the future, because the virus knows no boundaries. Mm-hmm. And if the Palestinians have a problem, we have a problem. If your family member has a problem, you have a problem. Our own health is dependent upon the health of the other, and that really is a paradigm shift.
Right. Ido, I was going to ask you what's on your radar in terms of a trend or trends, and it sounds to me like that is a trend, a recreation of the New World Order. But one of the things that this COVID-19 pandemic has led me to think about is what can upend a trend, right? There's a trend, or there was a trend towards greater urbanization. Now people are saying, you know what, maybe we need to rethink urbanization because of the spread of disease and so on in very tight quarters. So that's just one way of upending a trend. Are there any forces that you think will upend any trends that we have going on right now?
So it's an interesting contradiction here. On the
Yeah.
one hand, we've never been so technologically connected. Scientists call it hyperconnectivity, which means that globalization has never been tighter. On the other hand, because nation states manage the crisis and they are the regulators, the role of the nation state has never been more evident, it's never been more visible. So you have two forces, contradictory forces, emboldened by the crisis. Nationalism on the one hand and globalization on the other. And it's a very interesting thing. And I think that technology will prevail in the end, because the real trend that I see here is a very rapid shift to what I describe as flex economy. Flex economy is the type of economy that is based on freelancers, gig economy, and the kind of economy where decision makers work against their own instinct when they are doing things that are not expected of them to do. For example, the New Deal, FDR's New Deal, was not something that economists probably encouraged at the time, because it was counterintuitive. When you are in crisis and when you don't have money and people don't have jobs, this is not the time to print money and pour trillions into the economy, but that's exactly what needs to be done. And so what, in the case of the United States, needs to happen is a new deal, an introduction of a massive plan, national plan, to invest and rehabilitate national infrastructure projects. And that will revitalize the economy and probably will save tens of millions of jobs, if not more. And on a global scale, the same thing needs to happen. So I believe that connectivity will prevail. I've never been more connected with non-Israelis than I've been during this time of crisis. And so I think that technology is giving people opportunities like never before, and they're going to take advantage of those opportunities.
And what about self-sufficiency, whether amongst Israelis or Americans for that matter? Do you think that there was a heightened awareness that one needs to be more self-sufficient, because we can be faced with crises where at the end of the day, we can only really rely on ourselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it only emphasizes the need to be skilled, to have a certain type of skill or a certain type of talent that will allow an individual to survive. And that's the whole idea behind gig economy, that people basically put on the marketplace their skill or their talent for people to hire. And there are platforms like that all over the place. One very famous platform is the Israeli company called Fiverr, that gives people the opportunity to do that. But we see it all over. I believe that you'll see it also as a big disruption coming to the world of higher learning, to the American academic establishment. I think it's already happening. I'm teaching via Zoom, and I'll continue to teach during the summer remotely.
I was going to ask you about that, Ido. What do you think higher education looks like post-COVID-19, or at least dealing with COVID-19? Because it's definitely here to stay, both from the Israeli academic perspective as well as amongst U.S. universities.
So in countries like Israel, we're going to have less of a problem because tuition is very low. In Israel, all universities are subsidized by the government very, very heavily, which means that you get a lot for the money that you invest. This is not the case in the United States, where people are going to ask questions, especially the parents, especially the students that are going to mortgage their future. And they will ask themselves, what for? What am I getting in return? Am I getting a bunch of Zoom sessions? So I might as well just go to a different university with, the brand of the school is going to diminish very, very quickly when there is no physical experience. And there's a very powerful methodology used in America to recruit students by bringing the parents to tour the campus. This is very powerful. I've done it several times. I toured many campuses in the United States. It's a very powerful experience. Now, when that experience is not there, the brand will have to rely on something very, very intangible, something that is almost abstract, right? If I teach remotely, then what is the meaning of the brand? What is the meaning of being at Harvard if I'm not physically at Harvard? And so I think that this would change everything. It would change the level of tuition. It would change the acceptance ratios. It will change, I think it will give boost to platforms, commercial platforms that will offer academic level education using virtual platforms. Such platforms already exist, and they're very good, I have to tell you. They're very, very good, and they can recruit big names, pay them handsomely. And, one example is a masterclass, which is a wonderful phenomenon that happened way before COVID-19.
I love masterclass. I actually signed up for it. I'm devouring it.
Yeah. So that's I think that's the future.
Yeah. And so your students, how have they responded to this new paradigm?
So, it's not easy to sit in my case, most of them were in small apartments for 2.5 hours. And, it's not easy to listen and to engage in the conversation. But I think that by and large, they had a positive experience, at least if I have to judge by their course evaluations. And I had a positive experience. It was very relaxing to teach from the comfort of my own home. I had
you didn't have to commute, Ido.
Yes, I didn't have to commute, and it's you have more time to prepare. There's less pressure. I don't know. It's hard to explain. There's certain type of tranquility that comes with it.
Right. I would hope also, as kids are deciding what to do with their futures, that some, dare I say, would determine that, college might not even be for them. They might want to go to trade schools and learn a skill, not that you don't learn skills at university, but a trade skill and something where they can use their hands. Because at the end of the day, we need our electricians, we need our plumbers, we need our contractors. They say if your toilet backs up, you don't want to call an anthropology major, you want to call a plumber. So I would hope that also people reevaluate what they want to do with their careers and recognize that not everybody needs a college education. It's a wonderful thing to have, but certainly the university experience and the college experience isn't always for everybody. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there was a very famous sociologist in France, I think his name was Bourdieu, who coined the term the Credential Society. And he was referring to the deviation of the academic establishment from their original mission statement, which was to advance knowledge by scientific research, to produce new knowledge. The deviation was the fact that they became increasingly more and more important in society as a provider of credentials that are needed for social advancement and economic advancement. So people go to school not necessarily to be educated, but to acquire a degree, which is a credit. It's a form of credit. And that's how we ended up with the system where people practically and literally mortgaging their future. Mm-hmm. Young people start life with $200,000 of debt. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not sustainable.
That's really a nice segue, though, into this notion of aliyah and more people just going to Israel. Because with COVID-19, for example, you have a number of students that want to do a gap year in Israel. But beyond that, when I heard the numbers of people that want to make aliyah over the next 18 months, I heard that it was something like between 50 and 100,000 people will be making aliyah over the next year and a half. And it's quite astonishing. And I'm wondering just your general thoughts about that, and especially your thoughts as it relates to COVID-19 and just generally what's going on in society. I mean, is Israel seen just really as a safe haven then from all of these outside forces that are really impacting Jews all around the world?
And rightly so, because of the reasons that we mentioned, because of the fact that the virus did not hit hard, because of the fact that all the unrest eventually, as we know it, from history all too well, eventually, the Jewish community will be targeted. It's already happening. I've seen some very disturbing images from Los Angeles, for example, of people, desecrating graves and synagogues and so on. And, my own daughter and her husband, they're moving to Israel in August already. They made a decision. And I think that it has a lot to do with, as you said, about urbanization. The urban experience has been very, very difficult in the United States during COVID-19. So if you lived in the countryside, and if you had space and you had fresh air, it wasn't such a big problem, the lockdown. But if you lived in a tiny apartment in Manhattan or in Chicago or in downtown Atlanta, it's been very, very difficult. And that's why we left. We looked at we looked at the situation. We said, wait a second, we better go through this crisis in our home, where we have a nice yard and we can go out and breathe fresh air, and we can walk around the neighborhood rather than a tiny apartment in Chelsea. And so that's what we did. And so I think this has a lot to do with it. Now, as to the bigger question, yes, Israel is viewed as a safe haven, and rightly so. There's a good reason for it. And the reason is because Israel has never been better. If you set aside, for a second, the impact of COVID-19, which is global, but Israel has never had it better geopolitically, economically, and of course, academically. Life in Israel is full of promise for young people, full of promise, full of opportunity. And the opportunity is abundant in all the areas that matter, from lifestyle to the environment to, the incredibly inclusive nature of the nation, the celebration of traditions and religions and ethnicities and languages, through science and high tech and medicine, all the way to international aid programs and culture and the arts. Israel is the real deal today. And so I'm not surprised that so many people are interested in coming to Israel, and I'm sure that many of them are young people.
Yes,
I'm not
a lot of young
surprised
families, and like I say, are newly minted college grads.
And we have so many opportunities and places to, I was just in Beersheba visiting the cyber city, and I was blown away how, I haven't been there in a couple of years, and how quickly they built this place. And so Beersheba is very attractive. Haifa is very attractive. Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. I think there's an abundance of opportunities here.
And we have to give a shout out to the north of Israel, the Galil, which is so vibrant and really just a beautiful spot. Final thing, Ido, because I'm super mindful of the clock, and I don't know if I ever asked you this even, but where do you like to visit in Israel when you have a couple days off? Where do you like to chill out? And don't say in your home, because I know you like your home. Anywhere but your home. Where does Ido go?
So last time we had a chance to go out, we went to the city of Akko.
I love Akko.
We visited the amazing visitor center that the Jewish National Fund built. And I remember taking pictures of it and sending them to Russell Robinson just to show him that, it's such an attractive place. And so I usually, because I was born in Jaffa, right by the Mediterranean, I'm very drawn to the Mediterranean. So I love Jaffa, I love Akko, I love every opportunity to have to visit, the beachfront. We were just there, the whole family, the port of Tel Aviv on Saturday afternoon. So So, when I have a chance, that's where I go. And, I love the Galilee. I love the Negev. I love to travel all over the country. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do it frequently, but maybe post-COVID-19, we'll have more time to do that.
Ido, just final thing. I've mentioned here before on the program, don't know if I ever shared with you, but I always have it in mind to buy an old Ottoman house in Akko and to fix it up and to move in and maybe open it up partly as a B&B or something like that. Just one of my crazy ideas, because I also find it rather enticing of a place. So I might just have you as my first guest in Akko. How's that?
I think it's a very good idea, and I think you should do it sooner than later because people are discovering Akko as we speak.
I know, it's a fabulous place. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we end it right here on that very positive travel-related note. And right after this, I'll start Googling for Ottoman houses for sale in Akko. I'll keep you posted on that. Meantime, Ido Aharoni, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. I hope we don't have to wait this long to have you back again, but we do want to very much thank you for joining us here on Israelcast. And of course, we'll have info about Ido on the show notes page of our website, jnf.org/Israelcast. And as a reminder, we do release new episodes of Israelcast every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Simply search for Israelcast. And don't forget to rate and review us to make it easier for more people around the world to find us, because that's just the way that it works. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. Once again, it's jnf.org/Israelcast. Now, it takes a whole moshav to put Israelcast together. For that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Alicia Yaffe, Dara Shapiro, and Kevin Solka. Our editors are Jay Rothman, Roman Molino-Dunn, and Jake McGuire from Miratone Studios in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top and tail of the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. Israelcast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. For more information about JNF USA, visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just say hello, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, thanking you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of Israelcast.